So what's the deal with all these Tai Chi masters and martial arts kung fu guys in China getting beaten up all the time? I think we can all agree that kung fu is one of the things that attracts a lot of people to Chinese culture. It is an ancient art form. It's got a lot of history. It's a very beautiful thing to look at. It's interesting, and of course it was popularized through kung fu movies by Bruce Lee and others. There's one problem though, and that is when the Chinese government tries to use it as propaganda, it unfortunately falls flat. Now, I certainly am not an expert on martial arts, so I decided that I would get somebody who is an expert on specifically Chinese martial arts to come on and talk to all of us and tell us exactly why it is that these kung fu masters keep getting beaten up. This man lives in Beijing, has been studying Chinese martial arts for most of his life. He was actually part of the Wushu Federation and was involved in the Olympic bid for Wushu's inclusion in the Olympics. He's a technical and judge representative, so this guy knows what he's talking about. I would like to introduce you to my friend and martial arts expert, Byron Jacobs. So Byron, I'm super happy to finally chat to you again and introduce you properly to my audience over here. How about a little introduction about yourself? What actually got you into martial arts?
Bruce Lee, I think, like most kids. You know, at that time, nobody knew the difference between Chinese martial arts. What was available was karate and Japanese martial arts. So I started with those, and then later on got involved in Chinese martial arts when I found, access to a teacher.
That's fantastic. Now, we've known each other since we were probably about 19, 20, thereabouts. I can't even remember. But we used to have a lot of fun. I used to have these kind of Japanese pop culture anime screenings and events. And you used to come there and sell all your DVDs and stuff that you were getting from China at the time, I remember. So anyway, I've always known that you as being a very, very serious martial artist. I mean, it's kind of been the driving force in your life, at least from what I've observed.
Well, when I started in South Africa training in Chinese martial arts, at the time there wasn't a body that was affiliated to the recognized international wushu body. So at the same time as me being an athlete and I was training for competition, I set up the National Representative Federation that got recognized with the International Federation. So that bridged that, and we started doing, trying to start things in South Africa with competitions and educational things as well. And when I stopped competing, I became an international judge, and it just carried on from there. I became an international certified judge, which I was invited quite a few times independently because of my results. And in 2011, I became a member of the international body's technical committee, and that tenure ended in 2018. Unfortunately, not on a happy footing, but it's somewhat connected to the changes that have occurred here and within the politics that are involved with the sport, which are connected to, unfortunately, national politics. So, in a way, but that politics is always an issue with these organizations.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes total sense. And for those who aren't aware, Byron lives in Beijing. He has a Chinese wife, and he's been living there for... How long have you actually been living in China for?
Permanently, it's about 11 years, but from 2002, you remember, I was in and out every year for a few months training or doing something.
I remember.
Yeah, permanently for about 11 years.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, you know China in and out. And the one thing about martial arts, of course, I think most people know, is that it's very deeply entwined in whichever culture the martial art comes from, especially East Asian martial arts. So, karate is very Japanese, and kendo and all that stuff. And then your specialty, which of course is Chinese martial arts, is very intertwined, especially in the more older Chinese history and ancient Chinese history and so on. So you have a pretty deep understanding of China from that perspective. And this is kind of what we're leading up to here, is I would like your take on this whole situation that we're finding now, where you get these Tai Chi masters being beaten up by sort of MMA people, and what's actually going on, with all that.
Okay, well, I mean, what you said is 100% on the button. It's martial arts in general, especially Asian martial arts, are connected to the cultures that they emerged from. And they're as much a cultural practice as they are a physical practice. It's kind of a physical culture, if you will. So one of the things that I realized in the beginning time when I started doing Chinese martial arts was to really have an understanding, you need to understand not only the culture, but the language. And that set me on my path, you know, and these cultures are old. So these cultures are older than any system that we understand today, whether it be political system, whether it be a societal system or whatever we're used to today. These cultures are much older than that. And that's the important thing, that's where this clash comes in. The clash that you're talking about between Tai Chi so-called masters and today's MMA guys, for example, which has been in the news, is a clash between two separate cultural mentalities. But that is only when you look at it on the surface. There's always been this issue between classical martial arts and sport martial arts and athletes and amateurs and things like that, and style versus style. That's one whole kettle of fish. But what happened recently with regards to, more recently, is when it came out into the Western audience was with this guy called Xu Xiaodong, when he defeated that Tai Chi master in just a handful of seconds.
Yeah, you've met him. You've met him, right?
Yes, I actually knew him before that and during that and after that. And it was because I was doing grappling, and my grappling teacher would teach in his gym. So I had known him and his guys for a while. So for me, it wasn't anything amazing. I didn't realize that it was going to blow up like this. And even for him, it wasn't anything serious. It just was this guy, this Tai Chi person that had an interaction. The guy had said some things about his abilities, and Xu Xiaodong asked him to prove it.
Right.
And that's where that ended. But what happened there was not as simple as people in the West think, because the guy's name was Lele, and he actually in reality is not a recognized lineage holder. He is not what we know within the circles of Chinese martial arts as a legitimate high-level martial artist representing any method. In fact, he's self-proclaimed.
Right.
And this self-proclamation was enabled due to, you know very well, what's been going on in China for maybe the last 6 or 7 years extensively, which is a nationalistic drive.
Yes.
A nationalistic pride drive. And they connected that to Chinese culture. So we started to see, probably 7 years ago, the advent of a lot more in the media. So you'd see it deliberately in the media, these shows, you'd see these performances, these so-called documentaries, which were not real documentaries. They were actually just compiled. They were staged.
Right.
Of these amazing masters showing amazing skills to these ignorant Westerners, you know, being beaten up by this amazing martial artist. And the Westerner in the beginning of the show will be some Thai boxing or Krav Maga champion, and he'll beat up one of the, you know, you'll see him have a match and he's physically really good, and then this Chinese martial art master would come out and decimate him with some, you know, amazing technique that, you know, from a person who understands combat, you realize, well, this is nonsense. You know, that's the funny thing. The two mentalities, inside and outside of China. For most of the people in the West, we looked at it and were like, well, that's fake. You know,
mm-hmm.
And Lele was on one of those episodes doing magic tricks. I mean, literally, like they had pigeons that were on his hands and they couldn't take off because his sensitivity was just so amazing that as they tried to push with their legs to fly, he would just relax and the bird couldn't take off. And he was hitting a watermelon, and then after they cut the watermelon, they could see the internal damage, but there was no damage to the outside of the watermelon. And all of these things were done deliberately. You know, it wasn't as if this was like, oh, this is just some guy doing self-promotion. This was presented like a legitimate documentary. It was on a TV series called Experiencing Real Kung Fu. And it kind of went on from there into more things. You had famous Chen-style family people that were doing these similar little feats, like going into a judo school and throwing a black belt, like, you know, right. Oh, what an amazing Tai Chi skill, or going and challenging professional fencers and, you know, doing well against them. There was even an episode of him taking on an entire rugby team, if you believe it.
An entire rugby team?
Yeah, alone. You know,
okay.
Like 4 or 5 rugby players couldn't catch him, and he just avoided all of them and scored on the other side. And you know, like I said, for most logical, sane people who train correctly, you could see it for what it was, you know? But it was a propaganda drive, and there was a reason for it. And the reason was because of the connection between nationalism, the drive soft power, and culture. They connected these things. They realized that this is a way officially to drive soft power in the West because Westerners are interested in Chinese culture and specifically Chinese martial art.
Right.
So you started seeing a lot more of these kind of things officially from a couple of legitimate 10 people, but then you started seeing the crazies come out because no one is calling it, because no one is saying, well, this is nonsense, because if you say it's nonsense locally, then you're anti-patriotic, you're not patriotic.
Right.
You're against. So these people get emboldened to present themselves more and more ridiculously and make claims more and more because no one's calling them out.
Right.
And this culminated in what Lele did, and actually he contacted Xu Xiaodong on what at that time Xu Xiaodong had he had some online presence, quite a big online presence, and he was saying things on there, and he even put a demonstration, Lele, like, oh, he could get out of a rear naked choke with one hand, and he had his student try to do a really bad rear naked choke, and he got out of it, and we could all see that as nonsense. And he would make claims like he can defeat MMA with traditional Chinese wushu, and then this TV show came out with him doing magic tricks and defeating a Westerner. So Xu Xiaodong is really a result of that environment.
Yeah, he's like, let's try it out. Like, yeah, you claim you can do this. How about we go at it in the ring and prove it, right?
Correct. And then they'll always throw up hurdles like, oh, well, we don't use rules. And Xu Xiaodong's like, whatever you want to do. No gloves, want to poke me in the eyes and kick me in the groin, whatever you want to do. And the result is history because we all know what happened to that guy a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I saw it live because he flew down to Sichuan to do this. So I watched this. I'm like, well, an expected result. The guy is a bit of a clown.
Yeah.
Right? The whole thing's become a bit of a circus. And I thought that was the end of it. He flew back to Beijing. Everything was quiet. Suddenly, 4 days later, explosion all over China.
Yeah.
Why? Well, it's an MMA guy against what is supposed to be Chinese culture that they're trying to promote. And it's a Western idea of defeating a Chinese idea. And then there's backlash now. Now there's backlash because irrespective of the reality that the guy is not a Tai Chi guy really, and that it had nothing to do with that, now there's unfortunate truths that have been pushed out and perceptions that are going to be threatening to the direction, of what they're trying to do with the promotion.
Yeah.
And for me, and for a lot of Chinese martial artists, Western Chinese, and even some local, we were actually supporting what he was saying because he wasn't saying anything about Chinese martial art, although it has its problems like any traditional martial art. He was just calling out a fraud.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the step back wasn't showing that. Stepping back, it was simply just chalked up to Chinese versus the West, and you cannot have the West be Chinese. And his life got turned into hell. He had a lot of things happen to him. I remember at this period, even in his gym, guys just walking into the gym challenging him numerous times. And he tried to talk them out of it. I mean, they were like traditional guys off the street, out of shape. Not that Xu Xiaodong's in shape or that he's an athlete. He's my age. He stopped training for any professional endeavor many years ago. But this was a common thing, and he was getting lambasted in social media. He got his social credit, everything.
Yeah, he couldn't travel he got all his social media accounts were like blocked and deleted and stuff at some point. Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. There was too much loss of face.
Yes. I mean, you could say that his mouth made it worse.
Sure.
But like that aside, the reality of it, I mean, it should have simply just been an issue of that guy was not representative of Tai Chi. He was a fraud. He got beaten up because of claims and things that he did. Maybe it's time to look at what the official direction was and what was a result of it with all these fake documentaries, and let's just control that so it doesn't happen again. But Xu Xiaodong got challenged a few more times since then, an official fight, a couple of Wing Chun guys, a pressure point guy, all of them ended the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, they all ended the same way. And now more recently, we have a week ago, and this is connected to Xu Xiaodong because there was a guy called Ma Baoguo in Shanghai, who's an elderly self-appointed representative of a type of Tai Chi and a mixed hybrid style, who the official people have said a long time ago that he has nothing to do with him. But anyway, he's another one of those self-proclaimed people.
Sure.
And came out against Xu Xiaodong back then, and Xu Xiaodong tried to arrange the match formally, doing it correctly, All right, we'll arrange it, we'll get a place, we'll find things, we'll get it done. He flies down to Shanghai, he's waiting there, the guy doesn't show up. Eventually he shows up and has called the police. The police then close the whole thing down. At that same time, this guy, Ma Baoguo, what he did was he went to England because he had been teaching in England for some time, and he contacted an MMA fighter in England to shoot a video, and it was supposed to be a fluff piece. That was the arrangement. The old man is doing a creative fluff piece, just a video. It's not supposed to be a real fight, and just go along with him, do some light stuff, just go along with the old guy. And that was what the MMA guy got paid for, and he went along with it. But when Ma Baoguo came back to China, he decided to claim that he had defeated England's MMA champion, and here's this video, which we all can watch, and that's not fighting, and if that guy wanted to smash you, he could. We could see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this part of the reason he challenged Xu Xiaodong, saying, I've defeated that guy and I can defeat Xu Xiaodong. So Xu Xiaodong took him up on it. The result was the way it was handled, which made it look even worse. The police shut it down, the guys run away, basically. And all of this is now tarnishing the name of Chinese martial arts, but there's one LCD. These people are all frauds. I mean, they're all deluded frauds. They're like the epitome of the weird uncle, deluded weird uncle who's making claims that we all know aren't real, but for some reason people are taking them seriously, and I can't understand that. And that was the end of Ma Baoguo's story. Xu Xiaodong as well. I mean, it's been quiet in general with him for a while. Mm-hmm. But we just hear it out of the woodwork. A week ago, there's a match between Ma Baoguo and yet another guy. Apparently, he was said to have been a Sanda guy, an amateur Sanda guy in his 50s. Now, Sanda is a competitive Chinese martial arts free fighting event. It's basically boxing gloves, punch, kick, and throw. That's about it.
Okay.
Highly competitive, and he's an amateur. And same thing happened. He smashed this guy very quickly in a way that for me was a little bit shocking, because he's an old man. He's in his 70s, and he got knocked out. I mean, very seriously. Mm. So, but no one heard about this, that it was gonna occur. I mean, we all know Ma Baoguo, as I said, as being a bit of a weirdo, and now I can see yesterday, because the guy who beat Ma Baoguo had no media. He kept silent. He didn't want to talk to the press. He got contacted, and he did what he did, and it was quick, and nothing we didn't expect to happen. But now it seems like yesterday he's come out, and what is the story? He's come out saying the following. He's come out saying, no, he actually does Xini Chen, which is my style, right? He didn't use Thunder. He does Xini Chen. Now, Xini Chen is a direct, no-nonsense. It's got a reputation for being a fighting martial art. It's one of the more reputable styles of Chinese martial arts within a combat context, because a lot of reputable people used it in their line of work. And the style is aimed at that. There's very little fluff in it. Too many alarm bells went off. The main alarm bells are that, why is he saying this now? And why is he saying that he does Xini Chen? If you watch the fight, he did a couple of hook and a cross. I mean, very straight up stand-up boxing / general basic combat. He didn't use any specific, identifiable technique. It was straight up, what you'd expect from an amateur Sanda guy.
Makes sense. I mean, obviously, they want to now paint it in such a way to say it was actually Chinese martial arts that beat this guy, right?
Right. I'm feeling that that's the thing here. And I hope it's not because he has been lambasted himself.
We both understand China very well, and so we know why these kind of things happen, of course. This is quite fascinating. You've really helped shed a lot of light, at least to me, on why this went down, because although I've followed what Xu Xiaodong did in the past, we talked about him on our podcast, I think, when he came out and had that big rant on social media and stuff. I've never really put enough thought into it. And obviously, this is your game. This is what you do, martial arts. So you have a proper understanding of what's happened. And I think you've probably helped everybody else understand why this kind of stuff has happened, and it's all because of this push of propaganda and, you know, nationalism has kind of resulted in this weird situation.
This is why I said earlier that these cultures, martial cultures, and specifically Chinese martial art culture that we're talking about now, is older than any of this stuff. Yeah. It's older than the current political system. It's older, and so we shouldn't latch these ideas onto one another. You know, that is the beauty of Chinese martial arts and any martial art and the culture that they share, is that they unite people. It shouldn't become a factional thing that separates people.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the tragedy of all of this.
Now, that's a very beautiful thing to say, because quite honestly, and you know, most people who've been watching my videos for the last couple of years, I'd say last 2-3 years, have noticed that I'm finding it very hard to say anything positive about China, you know, and that's simply because of how it's changed so drastically over the last couple of years, and how the direction it's going in is completely opposite to when I first got there, and the reason I fell in love with the country. And one thing that I keep coming back to that I can say that is positive about China are the more traditional things like martial arts and like tea ceremony and, you know, those kind of things. And I think it is still a very beautiful thing, and it's a very important part of Chinese history, and it's something beautiful that we can look at that comes from China, and it's not tarnished by what's going on right now, at least in my mind. And so anyone who's interested in martial arts, you really have to check out Byron's channel, because that's what he does. He's instructional, he does instruction, he talks about it, he has a podcast. Anything if you want a deep dive into Chinese martial arts, this is the guy to go and check out for sure. And I can promise you now, out of everybody I've ever met, Chinese or otherwise, he's the most dedicated and probably the most knowledgeable about all the different martial arts and things that are going on out there, at least from the point of view of someone you can relate to and understand.
Well, thank you for that. You know, I'm trying to share these things on my channel and to demystify them, if you will, to a Western audience, because there is a cultural and a language barrier, and there's also an experience barrier that needs to be bridged, and I'm trying to do that with all these little endeavors on my channel and things like that. Because, as you said, there is value to these things. There is value to anybody around the world. They are beautiful things. They have a long history, and they enrich your life, you know. We should make our lives as rich as possible with things that are valuable and important at a deep level, and this is one of them.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Byron, it's been so good catching up with you, and thank you very much for you know, coming on to the channel.
It's been my honor to be on your channel. I'm glad to see you, and I wish all your viewers well.
Awesome. Stay awesome, man.